All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 17th session of the Entrepreneurship Gyan. Briefly, going back to the concept. So we started in July last year, 2023, when Praveen Mallaji was leading the startup and entrepreneurship special interest group, and I took over from him. And I came up with this notion to start uh, which we are calling it the Entrepreneurship Gyan or TEG. The idea was to have this kind of talks where we can have people like Professor Rao we have, but also we had people from the practice world like Kamal Rikiji. We also had people from the academic world from Babson College. We have Professor Anirudh Heber. So we always had a mix of people from what I call as paper practice and the policy world. And so Professor Rao may fit in all the three, or given the fact that he comes from a diverse set of experiences. But the idea is to create a platform where young entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs, can get some learnings from these veterans, but also we can create a platform for sharing and networking. So we have an active WhatsApp community, which is now more than 850 members. We are also coming up with an event which we are planning sometime next year, where probably you will be able to meet some of these veterans, and they will be our mentors, and you can take advices from them. But also we are coming up with a page where you can reach out to these mentors as and when you need, or your ventures need it. So the idea is to carry forward these discussions, talks on entrepreneurship, innovation, and how we can all take it forward. So being said that, I'll take a little while to introduce Professor Rao. His introduction is huge, but yeah, let me just begin with that as well. So Professor Rao currently is the group vice chancellor of BITS Pilani across all the campuses, obviously Pilani, Hyderabad, Goa, Dubai, and Mumbai. Prior to joining BITS, he served as a director of IIT Delhi. I think most of you would know him from his role at IIT Delhi. But also he was chair professor of nanoelectronics both at IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi. Briefly mentioning, he is also an alumni of IIT Bombay. That we didn't write specifically in the intro, just to let you guys know. Probably you may or may not be aware. Apart from that, he is an internationally acclaimed nanoelectronics researcher with over 500 research papers, over 50 patents, which includes 20 issued US patents. Which is quite innovative, given the career that he has in academia, and also which is actually affecting the practice world as well. Apart from that, he's a co-founder of two deep tech startups at IIT Bombay, NanoSniffs and SoilSense. Probably he will be talking more about it in this talk, which have successful commercial products in the market. That's quite fantastic. Besides this, he is well known for establishing major programs in electronics in India. And for all this accomplishment, he has been elected fellow of IEEE and the World Academy of Sciences, Indian National Academy of Engineering, and many others. So he has guided around 52 PhD students, which has supervised, who have graduated under his supervision. And he is working with a lot of different other academic institutions. He has been working in the past. For his contributions, he has received Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize in Engineering Sciences, Infosys Prize, IEEE EDS Education Award, which is from the IEEE Electron Devices Society for Education, and many others. He serves at editorial board of top leading journals like ACS Nanoletters, AIP Applied Physics Review, IEEE Journal on Flexible Electronics, etc. So he has been invited for several talks, and he has been delivered over more than 200 plenary and keynote invited lectures all over the world. Apart from this, he is on the board of various management institutions, where other institutions in India, and he has been working with a lot of other institutions around the world. So it's very brief introduction. Again, if I go into his research, I'm not an expert on electronics. It may take me a lot more to know and understand and talk about it. So I'll allow Professor Rao to directly go into his work as a researcher, his work as an entrepreneur, and now in the policy world, what he has been doing. Yeah, to you, Professor Rao.
Thank you very much. I have a brief presentation, so let me share my slides now.
Yeah, please.
I'm hoping you are able to see
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. And so my talk will give you some overview on where does academia stand in India today? I mean, what are the kinds of challenges that we are seeing in academia? Of course, a lot is changing, but I will talk about the current status and all of that, and also about what needs to be done at multiple levels, at the institution level, at the national level, through the policies, and also at the individual level. I think if we want to become that self-reliant India, as the Prime Minister calls it, Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think there are a lot of things that need to change, and academic institutions, I believe, have a major role to play in that change. And so that is what I am going to talk about. And so I will take a total of about 40 minutes, and then we can have some discussions. So if you, I spent all this time at IIT Bombay. In fact, my entire career was at IIT Bombay. I was there for 20 years. And in fact, all the work that you see I showed today is all done at IIT Bombay. I received all my recognitions and everything at IIT Bombay. And then I moved to IIT Delhi as the director. I spent 10 years, I spent 7 years at IIT Delhi, 6 years as the director, and 1 year as a faculty member, and then I moved to BITS Pilani. And right now I am a group vice chancellor for the BITS Pilani, and so that is what my journey is. So this work is essentially an IIT Bombay work, and that's where I made my entire career. If you look at the India's higher education system, you see that there are over 1,000 universities. These numbers can keep changing here and there, but there are 135 institutions of national importance, and then it's a very complex and very mixed system. You have all kinds of universities now, too many categories, for a country like India. I think we could have simplified it, if you ask me. But then, for whatever historical reasons it is, where we have just too many different types of universities. There are over 43 million students now in our higher educational institutions, and the gender ratio is 50-50. There are 50% men and 50% women in our universities, which is a good sign. I think, though in engineering that's not the case, but overall the gender ratio now is 50-50. And there are today about 300,000 PhD students. This number is slightly dated, but so we have about 10% CAGR, and so we have about 300,000 PhD students who are carrying out research and all of that. So this is what currently the Indian higher education system stands at. And our gross enrollment ratio is still pretty low. It's just 27.1%. What it means is only 1 out of 4 students coming out of schools can find admission in our universities. We are not able to accommodate all the students who come to these institutions, whereas the national education policy talks about achieving 50% gross enrollment ratio. Countries like China, US are at 60%, 70% kind of a level, but in India, we are at 27% now, and we want to take it to 50%, the gross enrollment ratio, by 2035 or so. So that would mean almost doubling the intake in our higher educational institutions, which is a tall order because the amount of money needed in order to do that, I think India needs to find that kind of resources. So this is what India is in one slide when it comes to its higher education, right? And now, if you look at the current status of Indian R&D, now this one paragraph actually talks about, summarizes the current state of art, right? India ranks first in the world in terms of number of institutions. We have, I've only shown you the universities. If you look at colleges and all of that, we have like, plenty of them. And currently, India ranks number one in number of institutions, second in the world for number of enrolled students, right? About 45 million students now in universities. And the third in the world for research output. We are also publishing lots of papers from India. And, sometimes it can be a concern, the kind of papers that are getting published. But even in the indexed kind of journals, right, we are publishing, good number of papers, and even by those counts, we are ranked third in the world when it comes to research output, and sixth for patent filings. This is a very recent phenomenon. India was not filing enough patents 5 years ago. For the past 5 years, we are actually seeing a double-digit growth. India is the only country which is growing pretty fast when it comes to the patent filings. Last year, the CAGR was, I mean, last few years, CAGR has been about 15% kind of a thing, year after year. And so that has resulted in India being sixth for patent filings. Of course, the licensing and other things are challenges which we still need to look at. Ninth for citations. So the quality of research is also getting better. And but that is where all the good things stop, right? I mean, the top 10 kind of rankings will end. And the 39th for innovation, right? The innovation here is, what is the value generated out of this research? Value in terms of, wealth, right? How we have how much of translational potential exists for the knowledge that we are generating. So on that count, we were 40th and worse. I mean, now we are at least 39th in the world. So while for knowledge generation we are third, but for knowledge utilization, right, we are 39th in the world. And that 39th is also mainly because of our IT and e-commerce kind of companies. And we are not spending enough money. 54th in the world, right, for percentage of GDP allocation for R&D. We need to be spending more money. I will show you some slides on that. And academia industry collaborations are on a very weak footing. I mean, we are not doing enough in terms of bringing academia and industry together, whether it's policies or programs or incentives or whatever it is. Academia industry are in are two separate entities in India right now, with hardly anything happening between them. 66th out of some 130 countries ranked. 81st for number of researchers. India doesn't have enough researchers, unfortunately. Our per a million population, number of researchers, we are about 250 to 300 researchers, whereas US, for example, would have over 4,000 researchers, per million population. So I think we need more researchers in the country. We have, in every area or in any area you look at, you find a handful of people, doing quality science, quality technology, but the numbers are still pretty small, for a large country like India. And our share of publications, though we are third in the world, but we are way behind US and China. The China is the 20%. Like every fifth paper is written from China, and every sixth paper comes out of China, US. Whereas India is ranked at, is just about 5% kind of a thing. Every 20th paper roughly comes out of India. So we are still, quite behind when it comes to both China and US. A lot of catch up needs to be done, not only in terms of number of publications, but also in terms of the quality of research that happens in India. Another biggest concern in India is the R&D investment by Indian industry. Now, if you are wondering why, you don't see any great product developments happening in India in our industry, it's because they are hardly spending any money on the research in the Indian industry. The R&D investments by Indian industry were 0.2% of GDP, which are pretty low. Compare it with the US, which is a much larger economy, 2.7% of GDP, South Korea 3.9%, and the United Kingdom 2.1%. So those universities, because they spend a lot of money on research, they are also capable of developing new products and all of that. Whereas Indian industry, it's mostly technology transfers and assembly kind of work, but not much research is happening in the Indian industry. This is a matter of concern, and that is also one place where Indian industry can do better, and also can do even better when it comes to collaborating with academia. And India, as I said, is one of the fastest growing countries in research, right? But though we are not spending enough money, we are writing lots of papers. So somebody recently calculated this metric: per dollar spent, Indians now are writing more papers than anybody in the world, including China. right? So therefore we have become experts at converting the funds that are given to us into publications. So that's one thing which is happening, pretty much in all institutions right now. So while the funds given to us are getting converted into knowledge, but when it comes to translating that knowledge back into wealth, no, we are nowhere on the scene, because on the innovation front, as you have seen, we are ranked 39th or 40th kind of a thing in the world. So I think we are writing lots of publications, generating a lot of knowledge, but we are not doing enough with this knowledge, which is getting generated out of academia. So this is one major concern. I think that is where we need to work on some real world problems which can have an impact in the society. And I will show you that that kind of potential does exist in our institutions, but I think it's the institutional mechanisms, which are a challenge right now, to for this knowledge translation. So I think I will talk about much of it. Any high tech area you take, right? India will be among the top five. And so whether it's quantum, nano, bio, lots of publications are coming out of India. And if you look at the startups today, there are like 117 unicorns or so out of India. And these numbers keep changing depending on the valuation levels. But India is ranked third in the world, as you know, for the startups and the unicorns today. So I think again a good sign. But the biggest challenge here is for a country which is ranked third in knowledge generation, right? How many of these unicorns are based on a research or a product oriented kind of an idea? Hardly any, right? If you look at among these unicorns, how many are actually have become unicorns by virtue of developing, converting some deep science into a technology or a product? I think hardly any. There are now, one or two which are slowly appearing on the scene with cutting edge technologies, where they have made a good business proposition out of it. But otherwise, most of these, I would call them the business model innovations. So most of these are, for example, aggregation model. I think they are all aggregating something in order to, improve the valuations. And so these kind of unicorns, I think that model for building a unicorn, right, in e-commerce, fintech kind of an area, I think India now is pretty well off. I mean, that ecosystem is pretty well developed. But when it comes to converting a deep science into a product and then make it into a successful startup, I think that sort of a challenge still exists. That ecosystem in India currently doesn't exist. So I will show you, again what we need to do in order to address that. But where do we actually see the deep science becoming, products, right? The deep science getting translated into something of use to the society. I think that is where educational institutions need to play a major role, because that is where a lot of research is happening. Therefore, coupling that research to innovation. Innovation, as I've said, is generating value for that research. So if you can couple that research, the great research that is happening in our academic institutions, into innovation, into useful products that are required for the society, I think things would be very, very different in the country, given our market size and given the size of our population and all of that. If you look at Indian institutions, there are any institution for that matter in the world, basically does three things, right? One is education, imparting knowledge which is already available, research that is generating new knowledge, and innovation, which is utilizing that knowledge for public good, right? So Indian institutions are doing pretty well when it comes to education, as well as the research. But when it comes to innovation, I think we are way behind, and there is hardly anything of major importance happening in our academic institutions. So this is one thing that is where the focus is now, through deep tech entrepreneurship, the startup ecosystem, the funding from Government of India. I think can we now start translating all this knowledge that is getting generated into something of commercial value? So this is what my talk is going to be focused on. As a faculty member in IITs for 25 years, now leading an institution like BITS Pilani, where again the entrepreneurship ecosystem is pretty well developed. I think I will provide you my perspective in the next 25 minutes or so on what India needs to be doing in this. I would say that the national education policy unveiled in 2020 is our moral movement, right? What is this moral movement? Now, if you look at the last 10 years, Indian higher educational institutions have become pretty good. I think a lot of good research is happening in those institutions now. And if you also look at the kind of research that is happening in our institutions, much of this research is still primarily driven by what is happening in North America and Europe, right? If you look at the research problems our researchers are working on, you would find, I would believe, almost 99% of topics are things which are being done elsewhere, right? Somebody publishes a paper there, and then you pick up that problem, and then you have more students, so you write more papers, kind of a thing. That's the kind of a research that is happening, where we are mostly, most of the research problems that are happening, that are being taken up in Indian institutions, are basically driven by what is happening in North America and Europe. And if you look at US, for example, I mean, US is seen as the hub for innovation, right? So many trillion-dollar startups have come about out of the US system. Even Europe has not been able to create even a single trillion-dollar startup now. But if you look at Europe, last 20 years, 25 years, so many companies have got started, and then now are valued at trillions of dollars. So I think that's one country where a lot of great things are happening, and the academic system there has definitely played a major role in all of this that is happening. Imagine US without its great universities, without its MITs, Stanfords, Berkeleys. I think you immediately see the importance these institutions have played to a country like US. But how did US universities actually, have become that institutions of excellence, or institutions of, eminence? But it's not. I would say, if you look at the 19th century, right? The good colleges in US, they were also following England and Germany, just as what we are doing right now, following the North America and Europe. Even US colleges were following England and Germany, because in those days, if you look at the early Nobel Prizes, most of them were all going to England and Germans. And but at that time, most of the research happening in England and Germany were in classics, theology, natural sciences, more focused on the sciences, kind of a thing. That was what US was doing, in 19th century. And what that is exactly what is happening in India right now in the 21st century, right? And but when did it all change in the US? In US, everything changed through this Morrill Act, which is known as the land grant university model. And if you look at the Morrill Act, for example, what does that Morrill Act, introduced in 1862, talk about? It said that the universities in the US, whichever are getting created under the Land Grant University Act, and almost all the great universities in the US you see today are all created through the Land Grant University model. What they basically did as part of this act is they've made the institutions to get connected with the society, right? The act essentially says that the universities need to work on such branches of learning as are related to agriculture and the mechanic arts. In those days, and the agriculture and mechanic arts were in vogue, and what the universities were asked to do is help these sectors grow and develop technologies, for some of these kind of sectors. And though the Land Grant University Act, all the great universities that got created started working on, problems of societal importance, and that is how they made their name into, what they are today. I think that connect with society is what has turned US universities into the centers of excellence. I think, that is something that should happen in India, thanks to the national education policy now. I think, India has found its moral movement through the national education policy, but it all, again comes down to how effectively do we implement NEP, right? I think that the implementation is in the spirit of how the document is written. It's actually a great document, because some good people were involved in drafting the document, and but the implementation is where I think, a lot more is desired. I would have done it in a very different way, in terms of priorities when it comes to NEP implementation. But whatever it is, NEP is a great document. If we can implement NEP in the right spirit, I think, India would have found its moral movement. And what it will basically do is most of the research that is happening in Indian institutions, I would classify it as solution looking for a problem. Lot of research is happening, but it's not directed towards solving any problem in IITs and institutions of technology. A lot of research that is happening is not directed towards solving a problem. It's all happening because somebody in US is doing that and we're also doing it, kind of a thing. What needs to happen is solution to a problem, right? So for that, somebody needs to come and give the problem statements to these institutions, which is where, in my opinion, the actual problem lies in India. The problem lies in, where are we picking research problems from? Right? As I will show you, most of our research problems are happening, out of libraries, right? So when you pick up these problems from libraries, they go back to library. I think that lab to land kind of a thing is what is missing mostly. It's always the library to library, kind of a research that we do in our educational institutions. So how can we change it, right? I think this R&D ecosystem inadequacies in India for innovation, right? I think at different levels, we need to be doing different things. If you talk at the national level, I think a lot of things need to happen at the national level through, through policy. And thankfully, now through the National Research Foundation, some efforts are being made to address these issues. But I think a lot more needs to be done. One of the very first problems at the national level is we are not spending enough money on science and technology, on R&D, right? Now we are as a per capita R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP. If you look at, we are among the lowest countries. In fact, if you look at this data, this is per capita purchase parity adjusted data. India is actually spending less money, gross expenditure on R&D per capita. India is spending less money than even the BRICS countries, right? Even the BRICS countries are spending more money per capita wise than India. India's R&D as a percentage of GDP is stuck at 0.365% for the past almost like 10, 12 years now. And if at all, it's actually going down from 0.65%, it has come down to 0.63% and all of that. Out of it, half of it goes for DRDO and ISRO, and only about 0.3% is what is available for all these national missions and all of that. I think India needs to spend more money on R&D, on science and technology, if we want to become a knowledge economy at some point in time. And another major problem in India is the protection of IP, the patenting. In my area, nanotechnology, for example, if I look at India in 2019, you could find this data. So we wrote about 15,000 papers in the nanotechnology. We are ranked third in the world, right, in terms of publications. I told you overall also we are ranked third in the world. So we are ranked third in the world in terms of publications. But how many patents have we filed, 2019 in nanotechnology? Just 54 patents, right? Look at US in the same year, wrote about 24,000 papers, ranked second in the world, but protected almost like 4,000, close to 5,000 IPs were protected, in the US out of this research kind of a thing. I think our publication to patent ratio is something that needs to improve. Right, we are generating a lot of knowledge, but we don't have that system in place, to protect that IP and then do something with that IP. This is where, one of the problems lies right now. This is again something that is changing fast, but then the quality of patents and, licensing and all of that needs to improve again. But the first step is to be able to protect this IP, through quality patents. I think this is one thing that needs to happen. This is second problem at the national level we need to address if we want to see more deep tech startups and all of that. I told you that any educational institution, there are three aspects: education, research, and innovation, right? And if you look at India, right, these are quite disjointed, right? I mean, education, research, and innovation are all happening in their own silos. And even in the research, the only thing that we are connected in research is the library. Neither is our research connected to industry, not to societal problems, not to line ministries, which deal with the problems in the society, or with strategic agencies. None of that is actually happening. The research is all happening, only coupled with the library. You go read some papers, pick up a problem, come back and execute the problem, write some more papers. That is what is most of the research currently is. In a good system, right? Where do we want to move towards? What we need to be moving towards is something like this, where education, research, and innovation are intercoupled, right? And the research draws from what is happening in industry, in the society, in the line ministries, in the strategic agencies, and some, of course, basic research that can happen through libraries too. But I think bringing all of these different stakeholders of the system and getting them in contact with the university research is what is the critical thing that is missing in India, and that is something that we need to be doing in India. So this is one thing. For example, I attempted at IIT Delhi. I will tell you, some of my experience on that. Another major problem that I see in India is at the national level is our top talent is not doing science, right? All our top talent are after engineering, and they all want to do, basically computer science and things like that. Nobody is interested in basic sciences, but for any technology, you need to, everything starts with great science. And for example, if you look at a mobile phone, a modern mobile phone today, right? And if you look at how much of science has gone into creating these mobile phones, and I can name at least a dozen Nobel Prizes. I recently wrote an article on this, the Nobel Prizes in Times of India, and where you can actually list out a dozen Nobel Prizes which have gone into creating a Nobel Prize. Where such great science happens, I think there the great technologies also get developed. Our top talent not doing any science, where even if they are interested in science, they still want to do engineering, which is what is hurting, development of good science or doing good science in the country, which eventually is affecting, all our capability to develop good technology out of any of the things that are happening in academia. So this is again one problem, and another problem is the missing institutional frameworks. The university research goes up to 3 4 technology readiness levels. Proof of concept is what you will see happening more and more in Indian academia, right? Whereas commercialization happens at at 9 10 kind of a level. But in between, we will actually bridge this gap, this valley of death, where taking that proof of concept and developing a prototype or a product, which can be commercialized. There are no institutional mechanisms in India today. Whereas every country which has been a technology leader, they have created these institutional frameworks, whether it is ITRI in Taiwan or Fraunhofer institutions in Germany, US, there are multiple such universities, institutions. I think in all of these places, there are, those institutional mechanisms to translate the research that is happening that ends at that proof of concept level, taking it all the way up to commercialization. India, there is no such institute. And for example, CSIR labs ideally should have been bridging this gap. But CSIR labs are also more competing with university than with anything else. I think we need to create those institutional mechanisms. I recently wrote some papers on that. In the absence of any of such mechanisms, and also in the absence of any great academia industry collaborations, India ranks 66th in the world when it comes to academia industry collaborations. That university research stays as prototypes but never really sees the light of the day. This is one big challenge that we see in many of our academic institutions. So that is where we need to bridge the gap, through creating such institutional mechanisms for all of that. I propose what I called India Labs on the lines of ITRI, in Taiwan, and Fraunhofer Labs. But I think, this is a subject for another day. But we need to create those institutional mechanisms is something that is the point that I am making here. Our higher educational institutions are also, the research funding in India is also pretty fragmented. right? So the problem that you see with that kind of an approach is because our higher education system is fragmented. For each discipline we have created institutions: science IISc or ISIS, engineering IITs, medicine AIMS, and then agriculture, Indian Council for Agricultural Research. So I think by fragmented higher education system, and then by fragmenting even our funding, for example, if you are working in a certain area, right, you depending on what area you are working, you go to that particular agency for funding. And I think this not having multidisciplinary universities in India is also one big challenge right now. But Indian institutions are slowly now becoming multidisciplinary. IITs, for example, are now branching out into other sectors as well, other disciplines as well. And I think it's important when it comes to developing for more translational kind of a research. The US universities, for example, the top ones with strong medical schools and strong engineering schools, so much of research happens there in life sciences and biomedical kind of an engineering. And whereas in India, hardly anything of that nature happens, because of this disjointed, higher educational institutions that we have. Add to that, there is a lot of bureaucracy. I call it, the not ease of doing research, but unease of doing research. I called it the 5Gs, right? The GFR, the general finance rules, the GST is a big challenge for R&D. There is a GEM portal for purchases. There is a global tender inquiry process, which delays everything. The governance issues, I think those who are from academia in India, can identify with all of these problems. But I think the bureaucracy has seeped into, the every aspect of doing research right now. Things are in a pretty bad shape as on today. And with the NRF, hopefully some of these things will get addressed. And DST, all these agencies are trying to see how we can make NRF different from, whatever institutions that we have for funding purposes. So these are some of the challenges at the national level. At the institutional level, as I told you, I think this is what we need to be moving towards. We need to bring all these different stakeholders, industry, society, government, strategic agencies, all of them closer to academic institution, right? The research that is happening in academia. And I think, if we can do that, lot of great things will happen. And at IIT Delhi, for example, as a director at IIT Delhi, I went with this mission. I said, the one thing which we will want to do at IIT Delhi is, create this idea factory approach. What is this idea factory approach? Bring unlike minds together, right? The multidisciplinary kind of activities you encourage, and create the right atmosphere and structure the interactions. What are these unlike minds? Unlike minds in terms of different cultural backgrounds. We started multiple joint degree programs, and did lot, even the international campus that IIT Delhi has, was seeded during my time. So we started looking at a multidisciplinary, the cultural diversity on the campuses, different disciplinary training. We started, almost like 10 academic units at IIT Delhi during my time, all of them with multidisciplinarity as a focus, right? And then we connected with multiple institutions: AIMS and All India Institute of Ayurveda, Indian Council for Agricultural Research, National Institute of Immunology. With all of these institutions, we signed agreements where we started funding faculty from these institutions to collaborate with, we funded our faculty, they funded their faculty, so they can come together and work with each other. We called it multidisciplinary faculty interdisciplinary program, and we created multiple avenues for faculty from diverse disciplines to come together and start working in newer kind of areas through such interdisciplinary collaborations. And we also brought people with different attitudes together, to research parks, to industry day. So more industry collaborations is what we promoted, at IIT Delhi, very by creating a dean of corporate relations, which happened during my time. We built a complete team in the corporate relations. Their job is to go out, connect with industry, and connect them with the faculty members. So, and then once people do that and start doing interesting things, we also created a strong ecosystem for high-tech startups, right, to central facilities, space, faculty appraisals. This is a program I am quite proud of. We call it Faculty Innovation and Research-Driven Entrepreneurship, where if a faculty member says, I want to start a company out of my research, institute gave them 50 lakh rupee as a grant. and even gave them sabbatical, right? Leave for a paid leave for 1 year. So they can take this money, they can even take the leave if they want to, use all the facilities that are available on the institute through a policy that we created. And can you now incubate a company out of your research? So these are the kinds of things we did: student startup action plan, lot of things we did for encouraging the deep tech startup ecosystem, and we could see the results in 5 years, right? In 5 years time, we our research funding went up by 4 times, and our funded research projects went up by four times. Increase in research funding and startups, 4 times increase we saw. We filed more patents in 5 years at IIT Delhi during those 5 years than the previous 55 years of the history of the institute. We published over 10,000 papers, 350 plus industry projects. I think over 225 new faculty, and almost two-thirds of faculty got engaged in research projects because of all the connections that we made between IIT Delhi and all the great institutions around it and the industry. And once we did that, in fact, when I quit, we had 275 plus companies, collaborating with IIT Delhi as compared to 50 plus companies 5 years ago. I think that is what our institutions need to be doing. They need to come out of those silos and connect with, other establishments outside, including all the different stakeholders. Even during the COVID time, we essentially did the same thing. And we said all the labs will be open and faculty can receive funding from the institute if they work on any aspect which is related to COVID. Because during the COVID time, other research we did not allow, but only research that can, provide some solutions to the problems related to COVID. IIT Delhi did very well. In fact, we had the least expensive RT-PCR kit. Before that, RT-PCR, people were charging 4,500 rupees. At that time, we launched an RT-PCR kit with 750 rupees kind of a thing. And it got ICMR approved, the first kit approved by ICMR. And we developed a lot of masks. We developed low-cost antigen kits, and the technologies developed in IIT Delhi during the COVID years helped at least 10 million people kind of a thing. I think that is the power that exists in our institutions. There is a lot of inherent talent. All that is needed is to focus the talent to solving problems. If you can connect them with the real problems, all this talent can be utilized to really solve some of these problems. Highest number of patents IIT Delhi ever filed were actually during the COVID year 2020. Because with all of this innovation, we were also simultaneously filing patents. I think that is the latent talent that exists in our academic institutions. IIT Bombay is same, IIT Delhi, all our great institutions actually have that latent talent. All that is needed is to connect them with some real world problems, and you will see a lot of great things happening out of these institutions. Once COVID got over, then all these 700 faculty started working on 1,000 different problems, and then again we went back to what we were doing earlier. But COVID brought that focus to one problem, and you could see in 2 years time during COVID how much of impact one single institute could make in India. I think that is a good learning there. Even at the individual level, I spent 18 years as a faculty member at IIT Bombay. I believed in this philosophy. I said, whatever work I do, right, it will have some societal application. And in India, if you are looking for a problem, there are so many problems all around you, right? You don't have to, go to US journals and start reading about problems. You look around, you will find problems. I often say that all the world's problems are in India. So therefore, if you are looking for a problem, just look around you, talk to medical doctors. They will give you, 50 problems without any hesitation. Talk to agricultural scientists, talk to security agencies. There are so many challenges outside. I think that is what I basically did. I started working on at IIT Bombay, the one of the first large multidisciplinary groups was our group, right? Some of us, Professor Shomya Mukherjee, I, and a few others, we came together, formed a group, and then we started to see what can we do, which is a problem in the society, right? And then, some of the problems we took up, one of the very early problems we took up was to develop a cardiac diagnostic system, right? And it involved 5 different departments at IIT Bombay, the first major multidisciplinary kind of a project ever undertaken in the history of IIT Bombay. And then all of us came together. We said we will develop a cardiac diagnostic system to detect some of these proteins in the blood for diagnosis of myocardial infarction, the troponin I, CKMB, myoglobin kind of a thing. This was a project we started in 2005 kind of a time frame when those tests were not available in the hospitals. And we did a complete top-down kind of a planning, right? We said you take the blood, filter it out, microfluidic channels, biosensor array, a complete disposable system, including the tabletop electronics. And then each department started focusing on, different aspects of it. And our goal was to, take all of that at the end of the day, put it into a system and commercialize and build a prototype kind of a thing. So that was what was the project. And so we started working on developing a platform. In my group, I started working on these micro nano cantilever technologies for detecting these proteins in the blood. And I will skip that in the interest of time because I've almost run out of time. So we developed these platforms, right? Our focused objective was not to write papers. Our objective was to, eventually convert all of this into a prototype and a product, eventually. So we started developing these platforms, developing, all the aspects in that block diagram that I showed you, right? And at the end of the day, after almost like 5 years of research, we were able to build our very first prototype for cardiac diagnosis. And as you can see, this is a iSense stands for infarct sensor, the myocardial infarction sensor. IIT Bombay, we incubated a company, NanoSniff, at that time at IIT Bombay. Now they are doing very well. And so this was a project funded by a government agency involving 5 different departments at IIT Bombay. So once we developed the platform, then we moved to other applications of the platform. The second project we took up, a similar group again, was to detect explosive detectors for the country. And but we wanted to, we used a very new and novel approach for explosive detection. A lot of research happened at IIT Bombay on explosive detection. You see a big security center created, because of all the groups that were working on this. And we developed the first electronic nose platform for explosive detection at IIT Bombay. Again, a multidisciplinary kind of a project, developing the entire technology needed for this. And subsequently, we worked on a MEMS platform, a nano electromechanical system, MEMS kind of a platform, where one of the ideas here was to, detect explosives by doing a nano explosion. You collect a few nanoparticles in the vapor phase or from the swipe, right? And you explode it using a microheater, by give it a thermal shock and explode these materials. The temperature release, because of the exothermic reaction, you measure it using a temperature sensor. So it's basically an exothermic reaction for the explosives and detecting the temperature change using a temperature sensor. So that's a platform we developed. And this we developed it into a complete product. And we transferred this technology to, again, NanoSniff, the company we had incubated earlier. This is called NanoSniffer. It's commercially available now. At least over a dozen airports in India currently use the technology. I have just a 2-minute video. Maybe I will just play this, so that it gives you a good idea on what we are doing, what we did.
Vehant Technologies, an IIT Delhi incubated company, and NanoSniff, an IIT Bombay incubated company, jointly manufacture and launch NanoSniffer, an advanced and affordable explosive trace detector, screening visitors and passengers for explosives at various public or crowded spots have become the norm due to the increase in the terrorist activities around the globe. Every luggage and person passing through the security checkpoint is tested by the security officer to check whether they have traces of explosives on their surface, skin, or hair. NanoSniffer proudly claims to be the first explosive trace detector in the world using microsensor technology. The microsensor of NanoSniffer is made using micro-electromechanical system, MEMS technology in semiconductor fab. The sensor uses fabrication techniques such as lithography, etching, deposition, spin coating, and finally released to the microsensor. The core technology is protected by patents in the US and Europe. All of our actions leave trace behind, which is then screened by the security personnel. The security has to concentrate at the sampling areas that are likely to be touched by hands. In the case of a bag, this will include handle, buckle, and zipper. Post-sampling, the swipe is inserted into the system where microheater subjects the particles into rapid heating. In case of explosives, this trigger exothermic reactions which are picked up by the integrated temperature sensor of the microheater, thereby landing each compound in its own thermal signature. The algorithms use these signatures to distinguish between explosives and non-explosives. Further analysis of the algorithms help in categorization into the appropriate class of explosives. The follow are few nanosniffer features. It is the first microsensor-based ETD. It detects and identifies explosives in less than 10 seconds. Identifies and categorizes explosives into different classes. Can detect ng quantities of explosives traces. It detects all classes of military, conventional, and homemade explosives. It is portable and affordable. It gives visible and audible alerts with sunlight-readable color display. Nanosniffer explosives trace detection technology can be deployed at airports, railway stations, ports, malls, metro stations, corporate parks, hotels, and tourist spots. The goal is to intercept and prevent access of explosives trafficking. Nanosniffer is 100% made in India product.
This particular technology this was launched by the ministry during the COVID time, 2020, we launched this product. Now it's there in multiple airports and all of that, and it's doing very well. In fact, NanoSniff, the company that we incubated in IIT Bombay, is commercializing it, and they have done a great job with this technology. And then we are further working on making this into an IoT node, and a lot of research is happening in those directions. I won't get into that. And now of late, after I moved to IIT Delhi, we started activities between IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay for agricultural sensors on similar lines as what I had done earlier. And we picked up the soil health card that Government of India has distributed. And we said between the two institutes, IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay, we will develop all these micro and macronutrient sensors for farmers. And we took it up as a project funded by DST with the goal of developing complete prototypes. And then we eventually were able to develop the NutriSense, a soil glucometer, and we incubated a company, Soil Sense, at IIT Bombay, based out of this technology. This is my second company at IIT Bombay, which is now doing very well. Both these companies are now ex-PhD students are running them, and now they are independent companies, and they are doing pretty well for themselves. And they have their manufacturing now happening in Pune for Soil Sense, and NanoSniff does it in Bombay. And so now a lot of field trials have happened, and so they have a complete suite of products in the market now, Soil Sense. And the company is doing well. It's already a 5-year-old company now. And so with and then currently I am working on organic dosimeters. Now my major project now between BITS Pilani and IIT Delhi is to develop the patches for medical dosimetry applications for cancer patients. When they are given radiation dose, the monitoring the profile as well as the dose, the exact dose value is where we are using now organic transistor based patches for this purpose. I have a US patent, way back in 2013 it was granted. So now we are using this IP that we had protected to develop this into a commercial product. The project has just started now between BITS Pilani and IIT Delhi, and I'll skip that because I have run out of time. But I think this is what can be done. If you can focus your research towards developing products, I think put the problem first kind of an approach. I think there is a lot of talent available in our institutions to find solutions, and And the commercialization can happen through the startup route now, because that's the way at least we have been able to commercialize our products. NanoSniff is now a full-fledged company. It's in the IIT Bombay Tech Park. They have moved out of incubator and they are operating out of Tech Park. And Soil Sense is based in Pune now. And then, so they are also doing very well and with multiple products. Therefore, India is opportunities. And we need to strengthen that academia startup industry collaborations, which is the need of the hour. We need to address the bottom of the pyramid. There are a lot of problems. I think these, to deep tech entrepreneurship kind of an ecosystem, if we can take up these problems, I think a lot of great things can happen. I think we need to move away from picking these research problems from what is happening in America and Europe. I think we need to innovate in areas where there is a domestic demand, as I have shown. And the local R&D for product development is essential if you want to keep the costs low. And nano sniffer, for example, which we have in the market, nobody can beat us on the price because it was entirely developed in India. And that's what happens if you can do R&D in India and develop these products. And it's possible to do high quality research in academic institutions now, and we need to make it relevant to India's needs. And there are multiple government of India schemes. One thing the current government has done very well is give a huge boost to startups. I think there is a lot of funding available now for deep tech entrepreneurship kind of activities and the deep tech startups. I think we need to utilize these government grant schemes, to develop these startups now. And that's one thing that needs to happen. Creativity in our higher education sector is as important as literacy at the grassroots level. We need to realize that. I think I leave you with this smile curve, right? And as many of you know, the value addition happens, the value generation as a function of a product chain happens when you do this concept and R&D and branding, right? And the sales, after sales and marketing. I think we need to have more and more companies which come up with product ideas. And of course, they can do manufacturing wherever it is feasible to do, wherever it is possible to do. But I think developing, conceptualizing new product ideas and having startups which come up with new product ideas is what is the most important thing India needs to do now. And at least I have shown in with two of my startups, we could do this very, very effectively. Of course, our manufacturing, was not very easy because we were doing everything in India, but it took a little bit of time. But now I think, with all the manufacturing talk happening in the country, I think, it's a great time for deep tech entrepreneurship to flourish in the country. I hope to see more and more students getting into this area. I'll stop here. These are all my group photographs from IIT Bombay. I was in the AA department. We had a great time at IIT Bombay doing all of this research. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Professor, for such a nice talk. There are a lot of questions that came on the way. Some of it you already answered while going down the presentations. But let's take one or two questions, given that time is already almost over. Maybe you can take one or two questions, and then we can call it off from there. From there, just for the sake of taking questions, let me take one or two. So one question is from Ramesh. Ramesh Tumulur is a great friend of mine from Hyderabad. He's asking, while there is an aspiration to increase research scholars and research, but do you think we have the requisite infrastructure and expertise? Obviously, I understand at IIT Bombay, we have IIT Delhi, we have BITS, we have. But what about country in general? Would you like to talk about it a bit?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was not reading these messages. The toolbar was
No,
coming.
you don't have to. You don't have to. I'll take the question. That's why you don't have to read, because there are a lot of messages, a lot of questions that are
Just
popping
repeat
up.
it
We don't
again.
have time for all of them.
I got distracted a little bit. Please say it again. What were you
No,
saying?
so the question was that Ramesh is asking that there is an aspiration to increase research scholars and research, but do we have requisite infrastructure and expertise to do so? Yeah.
I
Obviously,
think
at
the
IIT
IIT
Bombay, we understand. At Delhi, we understand. But in country in general, yeah.
I think, Indian institutions are probably, IITs are saturated now. IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi will have about 4,000 PhD students. Anything more than that will be difficult now to accommodate in these institutes. But the private institutions can grow, right? I mean, but the private institutions don't have the resources to do high quality research. In BITS Pilani, we are doing it now very aggressively because BITS Pilani receives, a bit of funding from government. We raise about 100 crores every year for research. but private institutions have a scope to grow in research, but they don't have the resources. Whereas the public funded institutions, particularly IITs, research is happening only in these handful of institutions now. Our university system is all gone now when it comes to, doing that level of research. I think private institutions can grow further in research. I think that's one potential that exists in India, but they need to generate those resources.
Thanks a lot. So it's quite fantastic to know, because a lot of people here probably would be from leading those private institutions or working in those private institutions. So it could be a good key takeaway for them as well. So Rishi, please take the next question.
Hi, Professor Ram Gopal. Love the talk today. Here's the next question from Shubham Bharadwaj. He's asking, what support can the bureaucracy provide in translating this knowledge generated into wealth? And you alluded to startups. Government is supporting startup is definitely one of those. Are there any other ways government is supporting this translation from research to dollars?
I think the government funding for startups now has grown multifold. And in fact, we should look at technology innovation hubs that Department of Science and Technology has created. There are 25 technology innovation hubs in different areas with a mandate to fund startups. Each one of these technology innovation hubs is given anywhere from 125 crores to 175 crores. And that's the money they should use to incubate more and more startups in the technology area. And then there are BIRAC and multiple DBT schemes, BIRAC and big kind of grants. MIT is also funding now the startups quite a bit. There are many schemes now, MIT, DST, DBT. I think these are the places to look at if you are looking for startup funding, and quite a few schemes now. I think in terms of manufacturing, it's still a problem. If you are working in a deep tech space and if you need to put your product together, the facilities is still a challenge. You don't have, because there are not many Indian industries working on manufacturing, which is a bit of a challenge now to, build those prototypes. But that is one struggle, at least we had with both our startups. But I think if you can overcome that challenge of building prototypes, funding is definitely much easier now than what it was 10 years ago.
Great. Thanks for your insights. Next question is from Vivek Jha, and he's asking very relevant question. This same question, which I was trying to ask you before the talk began, that how can pan IIT networks, help in industry academia collaboration, and more importantly, there are a lot of IITians who are there who are quite innovative. They are doing good innovation, but they don't maintain that alumni connect with IITs. So it can be IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi, or other IITs. So how can this connection be built with alumni and collaboration within IITs, inter IITs, to do so, to bring the changes that you have been talking about?
No, alumni can be a great support. In fact, in BITS Pilani, that is one thing we are doing. One of the ways now I am now looking at funding from BITS Pilani alumni is alumni. I'm saying you create a fund, right? You fund startups. There are many VCs among the alumni community, whether it's IIT Bombay, Delhi. So many VCs among the alumni community. You are funding startups, at such regular intervals. Let some of the equity in those startups go to IIT. That can be, one way alumni can support IITs to even raise funds. If you provide them equity in the startups that you are investing in, right? A fraction of the equity that you are investing in, that is one way, institutions can benefit from. And more importantly, the mentorship, right? So, if you can, help the students, there are so many students, each of our institutions, you will see at least 100 to 200 startups in the hostels. So if you can connect with the students, understand what they are doing, and provide them that necessary advice or even a little bit of funding, very often the money a student would require is 2 lakh rupees, 3 lakh rupees. I think with that, the student would get started. So we, at least in BITS Pilani, now we started 2 such schemes where we are giving students, problems that exist in the society, and we are asking alumni to fund those projects. The funding is 1 to 2 lakh rupees only, but these are very early stage. where they have identified a problem and they want to work on a solution. And that is what is now funded by alumni and mentored by alumni, with the hope that, over a period of time, all those projects, at least some of them might become startups kind of a thing. I think connecting them with the right side kind of problem sets, providing them their seed grants, mentoring them, in terms of building the solutions to some of these problems, and then, providing the institutions, some equity in the startups that you are investing in. I think these are all the ways alumni can help boost a startup ecosystem in the country.
All right, Professor. Thanks a lot for your time and a fantastic talk. I can see already everyone loved it. We are just 10 minutes, late with our schedule, but I think that's fine. We were able to take some question, and yeah, thanks a lot for your time, and thanks a lot for all your efforts putting into the talk. Everyone loved it, and there are some more questions. Probably they may reach out to you just to let you know, because your email ID and everything is available. So yeah, you may take it
Please
from
write to me. I will always be happy. And I am sorry that that bar was appearing. I thought you wouldn't be able to see the bar only. I am seeing that bar
No,
on the screen, but
no, we tried to sort that out before, but okay,
I
that's
know.
all right. Yeah.
Anyway,
Thanks,
I'm
thanks a
sorry.
lot, Professor Rao, for your talk.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much. I will
yeah.
share the slides
Bye-bye.
if you want without
Yeah,
my name.
please, I'll write to you and you can share, and I'll share it with everyone. Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
a
so
lot.
much. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.